Have you ever felt people tense up around you? Without saying a word, they shift in their seat. They avoid eye contact. They change the subject quickly when you speak. There's this strange energy in the room, like something invisible just entered the conversation. And the strangest part, you didn't do anything. You didn't say anything offensive. You didn't act aggressively or rudely. You were just present, just thinking, just being yourself. Yet somehow, that was enough to make them uncomfortable. What they sense lives in your mind, something they can't name, something they can't explain, something that quietly disturbs them, even though they'll never admit it out loud. Most people will never tell you this truth, because they don't even fully understand it themselves. They're afraid of you. Your mind sees what theirs refuse to. Your mind cuts through illusions. It asks questions they don't want to answer. It notices contradictions they've spent years ignoring, and that terrifies them. Deep down, they know that if you can see through the surface, you can see through them too. Nietzsche warned us about this over a century ago. He said, "The individual who sees too much is always feared by the crowd." People fear clarity. They fear anyone who can look past the masks, the scripts, the comfortable lies that keep society running smoothly. They fear the person who refuses to pretend, the person who doesn't laugh at jokes that aren't funny, the person who doesn't nod along when everyone else is nodding, the person whose silence feels heavier than words. If you've ever felt misunderstood, rejected, or isolated for no clear reason, if you've ever wondered why people seem uncomfortable around you even when you've done nothing wrong, if you've been called too serious, too intense, or hard to read, then you already know what I'm talking about. This video will show you exactly what they're really afraid of. You'll understand 3 things: why your mind threatens people without you even trying, the invisible signals that reveal their discomfort, the body language, the tone shifts, the social patterns that prove they're reacting to something deeper than what you're saying, and how to turn that fear into silent power. Once you understand what's happening, you stop questioning yourself. You stop trying to fit in. You start using that quiet intensity as the advantage it was always meant to be. Let's begin. Let's talk about what people are really afraid of in your mind, and why that fear says more about them than it ever will about you. So why does this happen? Why do people react this way to someone who simply thinks differently? The answer lies deeper than most are willing to admit. Society functions on a delicate agreement, an unspoken contract that says we'll all play along. We'll pretend certain things are true. We'll ignore certain contradictions. We'll laugh at the right moments, nod at the right times, and never question the stories we've been told to believe. This agreement keeps everything running smoothly. It keeps people comfortable. It keeps the machinery of social life turning without friction. But then someone like you comes along, someone whose mind doesn't automatically accept the script, someone who notices the gaps, the inconsistencies, the things that don't add up. And suddenly, that delicate agreement feels threatened. You see, most people don't think deeply about their beliefs. They inherit them from parents, from teachers, from friends, from whatever culture they grew up in. These beliefs become part of their identity. Questioning them feels like questioning who they are. So when your mind naturally probes, analyzes, or challenges these beliefs, even indirectly, even without saying a word, they feel exposed, vulnerable, uncomfortable. They can't articulate why you bother them. They just know that being around you makes them feel like they're standing under a spotlight they didn't ask for. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance. It describes the mental discomfort people feel when they hold 2 contradictory beliefs at the same time, or when their actions don't match their stated values. Most people live with low-level cognitive dissonance constantly. They say they value honesty, but tell small lies every day. They claim to care about others, but rarely act on it. They present themselves one way in public and live completely differently in private. And they manage this discomfort by simply not thinking about it, by keeping themselves distracted, by surrounding themselves with people who won't call attention to the contradictions. But your mind doesn't let things slide. You notice patterns. You remember inconsistencies. You see when someone's words don't match their behavior, And even if you never say anything, even if you just sit there quietly observing, people can feel it. They can sense that you're not buying what they're selling. And that makes them deeply uncomfortable. Because if you can see through them, then maybe others can too. Maybe the mask isn't as convincing as they thought. Maybe the performance isn't fooling anyone. This fear of the perceptive mind isn't new. Throughout history, the people who saw too clearly were often the ones society tried to silence. Socrates was executed for asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Galileo was punished for observing truths that contradicted accepted beliefs. Countless philosophers, artists, and thinkers were marginalized, mocked, or worse, simply because their minds refused to accept comfortable illusions. These weren't violent people. They weren't trying to harm anyone. They were just thinking, observing, questioning, and that alone was enough to make them dangerous in the eyes of the majority. The same pattern plays out today, just in subtler ways. The person at work who asks, "Why do we do it this way?" gets labeled difficult. The friend who doesn't laugh at cruel jokes gets called uptight. The family member who refuses to participate in dysfunctional patterns gets accused of thinking they're better than everyone else. The crowd protects itself by isolating anyone who threatens the shared illusion, and the weapon they use isn't violence anymore. It's social rejection, it's gossip. It's that cold distance that makes you feel like you did something wrong when all you did was exist with a mind that sees clearly. Understanding this changes everything, because once you realize that their discomfort has nothing to do with you being wrong or broken or too much, once you understand that their fear is a reflection of their own fragility, their own need to maintain illusions they've built their entire lives around, then you stop internalizing their rejection. You stop wondering what's wrong with you. You start seeing their behavior for what it really is, a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from a truth they're not ready to face. Your mind isn't the problem. Your clarity isn't the flaw. Their fear is simply proof that you see something they wish would stay hidden, and that's not your burden to carry. That's theirs. Now that you understand why people fear your mind, let's talk about how this fear shows up in real life. The first thing you'll notice is the way people look at you, or rather, the way they avoid looking at you. When you speak, they glance away quickly. When you're silent, they steal quick glances to see if you're judging them. Their eyes never quite settle on yours for long. There's always this flicker of uncertainty, like they're trying to figure you out, but don't really want to know the answer. Compare this to how they look at people they're comfortable with. With those people, eye contact is easy, natural, relaxed. But with you, there's tension, a guardedness that never fully goes away. Then there's the physical distance. People who are threatened by your mind will create space between you and them, even in casual settings. They'll position themselves slightly farther away in conversations. They'll find reasons to step back or turn their body at an angle instead of facing you directly. It's subtle. Most of them don't even realize they're doing it. But their body is responding to a perceived threat, and that threat is the feeling that you can see too much, that you're reading them in ways they can't control. Watch how conversations shift when you enter a room. If people were laughing and joking, the energy often changes. Things get a little quieter, a little more careful. Jokes that were flying freely a moment ago suddenly stop. Topics get safer, more surface level. Because on some level, they know you're not going to laugh at things that aren't actually funny. You're not going to pretend to care about gossip or trivial drama, and that makes them self-conscious about what they were just saying. You'll also notice how often people try to explain themselves to you, even when you haven't asked. They'll justify their choices, defend their opinions, offer reasons for things you never questioned. This happens because your presence alone makes them feel evaluated. Your silence feels like scrutiny, so they fill the space with explanations, trying to prove something you weren't even challenging. It's exhausting for them and confusing for you, because you genuinely weren't judging them, but they can't help it. Your mind creates a mirror they don't want to look into. Then come the subtle attacks, not direct confrontation. That would require them to admit their discomfort. Instead, they use sarcasm, little jabs disguised as jokes, comments about you being so serious all the time, or living in your own world, or overthinking everything. They'll frame it like friendly teasing, but there's an edge to it, a resentment underneath. What they're really saying is, you make me feel inadequate, and I need to cut you down to feel better about myself. Sometimes the criticism is even more indirect. They'll praise qualities in others that are the opposite of yours. They'll talk about how fun or easygoing someone else is, with just enough emphasis that you know it's aimed at you. They'll celebrate superficiality and mock depth without ever naming you directly. But you feel it. You know what they're doing. And the reason they do it is simple. Your depth threatens their shallowness. Your substance exposes their emptiness. So they try to make depth itself seem like a flaw. Perhaps the most telling sign is how often you're left out. Not in obvious ways, not with direct rejection, but through forgetting to invite you. Through group chats you're mysteriously not added to. Through conversations that pause when you walk by and resume when you leave. Through plans made in front of you that somehow don't include you. This isn't accidental. People naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel comfortable, and you don't. You make them feel seen, observed, accountable, so they create distance. They build their social circles around people who won't challenge the illusions, who won't notice the contradictions, who won't make them think too hard about who they really are. And the painful part, you'll often blame yourself. You'll wonder what you did wrong. You'll replay conversations looking for the moment you messed up. But there was no moment. There was no mistake. The only thing you did was exist with a mind that sees clearly. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone at work who's well liked by everyone, charismatic, funny, always knows what to say. But you've noticed small things, the way they take credit for other people's ideas, the way they change their story depending on who they're talking to, the way they throw others under the bus when it benefits them. You haven't said anything. You've just noticed. But whenever this person is around you, their energy changes. They're less confident, more careful with their words. They avoid you in meetings. They never ask for your opinion. And sometimes they make little comments about you to others. Nothing overtly cruel, just enough to plant seeds of doubt. They're kind of quiet, aren't they? I don't think they're really a team player. What's happening? They know you see through them. And instead of changing their behavior, they're trying to discredit you before you can speak. This is what fear of a perceptive mind looks like in action. The first principle is this: silence is a weapon, and you need to learn when to use it. Most people feel compelled to fill every silence, to explain themselves, to defend their thoughts, to prove they're not what others think they are. But when you have a mind that people fear, your silence carries weight. It makes people uncomfortable in ways that words never could, and that discomfort can work in your favor if you understand how to wield it strategically. In conversations where people are performing, where they're putting on a show or telling stories they want everyone to believe, your silence forces them to work harder. They start over-explaining. They start justifying details you never questioned. They reveal more than they intended to because they're trying to convince you. And the more they talk, the more they expose. You don't have to interrogate anyone. You don't have to challenge them directly. You just have to be present, attentive, and quiet. Your mind does the rest. But here's the key. You also need to know when to speak, because silence loses its power if you never break it. When you do speak, make it count. Say something precise, something that cuts through the noise, something that shows you've been paying attention in ways others haven't. You don't need long speeches. You don't need to dominate the conversation. A single well-placed observation can shift an entire room. People will remember it. They'll think about it later. And they'll be more cautious around you because they know you're capable of seeing what they're hiding. The second principle: let people's fear of you become your shield. When others sense that you see through them, they're less likely to try to manipulate you. They're less likely to lie to your face or play games with you, because they know it won't work. Your reputation for being hard to read or too perceptive actually protects you from a lot of social warfare that others have to constantly navigate. People won't waste time trying to deceive someone they believe can see through deception. This doesn't mean you become paranoid or closed off. It means you cultivate a presence that naturally discourages dishonesty. People will still approach you, still interact with you, But they'll do so more carefully, more authentically, because they know that surface-level performances won't land with you. And the interesting thing is, once people realize they can't hide from you, they often stop trying. The ones who are worth knowing will drop their masks around you. They'll be more real, more vulnerable, more honest, because they'll sense that you can handle the truth they're afraid to show others. The ones who can't drop their masks, they'll keep their distance, and that's fine. Those aren't your people anyway. Why would you want relationships built on performance and pretense? Your mind naturally filters out the people who live in illusions. That's not a curse, that's a gift. The third principle, trust your perceptions, even when others gaslight you. This is critical, because when people fear your mind, one of their favorite tactics is to make you doubt it. They'll call you paranoid. They'll say you're reading too much into things. They'll tell you you're overthinking, being too sensitive, imagining problems that aren't there. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing them. You'll start second-guessing what you clearly saw or felt. Don't fall for it. Your mind picks up on patterns others miss. You notice inconsistencies because they're actually there. You feel tension because tension exists. When someone tells you you're imagining things, what they're really saying is, I need you to stop noticing what I'm doing. They're asking you to turn off your perception so they can continue operating in the shadows, and you don't owe them that. This doesn't mean you become arrogant or closed to feedback. It means you develop a quiet confidence in your ability to read situations accurately. You learn to trust that uncomfortable feeling in your gut when something doesn't add up. You stop apologizing for seeing what you see, and over time, this confidence becomes unshakable. People can call you whatever they want. They can mock your intensity or your seriousness, but you know what you know, and that certainty is something no one can take from you. The fourth principle, use observation to understand leverage. When you understand what people fear, what they're hiding, what contradictions they're trying to ignore, you gain a form of influence that doesn't require force or loudness. You simply know more than they think you know, and that knowledge gives you options. Maybe you're in a negotiation, and you notice the other person is more desperate than they're letting on. You don't have to call them out. You just adjust your approach based on what you've observed. Maybe you're in a group setting and you see who's really making the decisions versus who's just performing authority. You don't announce it, you just direct your attention accordingly. Maybe someone is trying to manipulate you and you recognize the tactic. You don't get angry, you just don't fall for it. This kind of influence is quiet, invisible. Most people won't even realize it's happening, but you'll notice the difference in your results. You'll find yourself navigating social situations with more ease, making better decisions about who to trust, avoiding traps that others fall into, positioning yourself advantageously without ever having to play the games others play. And all of it comes from simply paying attention and trusting what you see. Here's what most people will never understand. The discomfort others feel around you isn't a sign that you need to change. It's a sign that you're operating on a different level. They're playing checkers. You're seeing the whole board. And yes, that creates distance. Yes, that creates tension, but it also creates opportunity. The ability to see clearly is rare. Most people spend their entire lives in a fog of self-deception and social performance. You don't have that limitation. And once you stop seeing your clarity as a burden and start seeing it as the strategic advantage it actually is, everything changes. You stop trying to fit in. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You start using your mind the way it was meant to be used, as a tool, as a weapon, as a source of power that no one can take away from you. People fear your mind not because there's something wrong with it. They fear it because it sees what they've spent years trying to hide. From others, from themselves. Your mind cuts through the stories people tell to make themselves feel better. It notices the gaps between who they claim to be and who they actually are. It doesn't accept illusions just because everyone else does. And that kind of clarity is rare. So rare that most people don't know how to handle it when they encounter it. You've probably spent a lot of your life wondering why you felt so different, why social situations that seemed easy for everyone else felt exhausting for you, why people seemed uncomfortable around you, even when you tried your hardest to fit in. And maybe you blamed yourself. Maybe you thought you were broken or too much or not enough, but now you know the truth. The problem was never you. The problem is that most people are afraid of being truly seen. And you have a mind that sees, that's not a flaw, that's not something to apologize for, that's your nature. And trying to suppress it to make others comfortable is like asking a lion to pretend it's a house cat. You can do it for a while, but eventually the pretending becomes more painful than the rejection ever was. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He spent his life writing for people who thought too much, who saw too clearly, who felt too isolated by their own perceptions. And he said something that I think speaks directly to what we've been talking about. He said that the truly powerful thinker often walks alone, and that aloneness isn't a punishment. It's not a sign of failure. It's the natural consequence of operating at a level most people will never reach. The crowd fears anyone who refuses to join them in their shared illusions, so they push that person to the margins. They create distance, they whisper, they exclude. And the person with the powerful mind has a choice. They can spend their life trying to win back the approval of people who were never going to give it, or they can accept the solitude and recognize it for what it really is: freedom. When you embrace your mind instead of fighting it, three things happen. First, you gain clarity about yourself. You stop questioning whether you're too intense, too serious, too different. You understand that those qualities aren't problems to fix. They're features of a mind that operates with depth and precision. And once you stop seeing yourself through the eyes of people who fear you, you start seeing yourself accurately. And that self-knowledge is worth more than all the social acceptance in the world. Second, you gain clarity about others. You stop taking their behavior personally. When someone avoids you, when they make subtle digs, when they exclude you from their circles, you don't spiral into self-doubt anymore. You recognize it as their discomfort, their fear, their inability to handle what you represent. And that recognition is liberating, because it means you're no longer carrying the weight of other people's limitations. You're no longer responsible for making them comfortable. You're free to just be who you are and let them deal with their own reactions. Third, you gain something most people never find: strategic clarity, the ability to move through the world with your eyes open, to see patterns others miss, to protect yourself from manipulation, to build relationships with people who can actually handle authenticity, to position yourself advantageously without needing to play the exhausting games everyone else is playing. Your mind becomes a tool instead of a burden, and that shift changes everything. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The fear people have of your mind, that fear is information. It tells you who's comfortable with truth and who's only comfortable with illusions. It tells you who can handle depth and who needs everything to stay surface level. It tells you who's worth your time and who's going to drain your energy trying to make them accept something they're fundamentally opposed to. That fear is a filter, and filters are useful. They save you years of wasted effort, years of trying to belong in places that were never meant for you. Embrace your mind, stop apologizing for it, stop dimming it, stop pretending you don't see what you clearly see. Let the world quietly fear it if that's what they need to do. Because that fear, that's not your problem to solve, that's theirs. Your job is to use the clarity you've been given, to trust your perceptions, to build a life that honors the way your mind actually works, instead of forcing it into shapes that were designed for people who think differently than you do. The world doesn't need more people who pretend. It doesn't need more people who play along with comfortable lies just to keep the peace. What it needs, whether it knows it or not, are people who can see clearly, who can think deeply, who refuse to accept illusions just because everyone else does. And if you're one of those people, then you already have something most people will spend their entire lives searching for and never find. You have a mind that cuts through the noise, a mind that sees truth even when truth is uncomfortable, a mind that operates with depth in a world obsessed with surfaces. That's not a curse. That's power, and it's yours to master. If this resonated with you, you're not alone. There are others who think like you do, who see what you see, and I make content for them, for you. So if you want more of this kind of analysis, subscribe. There's a lot more to explore about human behavior, social dynamics, and the philosophy that makes sense of it all. And if you found value in this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been made to feel like their mind is the problem, because it's not. It never was. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.